Tyler Brennan wiped sweat from his forehead as the Oklahoma sun melted into the horizon, painting the sky blood orange over Pushmataha County. The summer camp buzzed with teenage laughter, counselors packing equipment, kids writing phone numbers on t-shirts with permanent markers. At 22, engineering degree waiting back in Norman, he felt suspended between childhood and the terrifying unknown of real life. His eyes fixed on Cassie Morrison sitting by the lake, sketching pine trees with charcoal-stained fingers. Her dark hair caught the dying light. "Last night of freedom before real life starts," she said without looking up. He sat beside her on the weathered dock, their fingers intertwining. The lake reflected the burning sky like glass holding fire. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "What if Norman isn't big enough for my dreams?" Tyler kissed her forehead. "Then we'll find a bigger world. Together." Footsteps approached. Measured, confident. Reverend Edmund Hale emerged with his warm smile, leather Bible tucked under his arm. At 38, he'd been the camp's spiritual counselor for 6 years, beloved by every kid. "Beautiful evening for a walk, isn't it? There's a clearing past the eastern ridge, perfect for stargazing. I could show you both." Tyler hesitated. Something in his gut tightened, but Cassie's eyes lit up. "That sounds amazing, Reverend." She was already standing. Hale's smile deepened. "Wonderful. 15-minute walk. Bring flashlights." They followed him into darkening woods, 3 beams cutting through trees. Camp sounds faded, laughter dissolving into cricket songs. The forest floor crunched underfoot, dry from weeks without rain. Cassie squeezed Tyler's hand. "Feels like we're walking into another world." The Reverend stopped at a rocky outcrop. Boulders jutted like broken teeth, covered in moss. "Just through here," he whispered, voice suddenly different. He pushed aside brush, revealing a narrow cave entrance, black as a scream. The clearing's beyond this passage. Tyler's instinct screamed run. But Cassie stepped forward, trusting. Then everything went black. Cloth over his face, chemical sweetness. Cassie's scream cut short, the world tilting into nothing. Sheriff Tom Pritchard stood in the command tent, face ashen under fluorescent lights. Maps covered tables marked with search patterns yielding nothing. 48 hours, he told assembled volunteers, voice cracking. 2 college kids don't just vanish. Not in my county. But Pushmataha County had swallowed them whole. 300 volunteers combed every inch of forest with radios, GPS units, thermal cameras. Bloodhounds lost the scent at the eastern ridge, circling and whining, confused, as if Tyler and Cassie had evaporated. Cassie's mother, Patricia, collapsed when they found her daughter's sketchbook by the lake. Last drawing unfinished, just a horizon line where her hand stopped mid-stroke. She clutched it to her chest, sobbing without sound. Tyler's father, Robert, a Vietnam veteran, organized search parties lasting months. He became gaunt, obsessed, sleeping in the woods. "He's out there," he'd tell anyone listening, eyes hollow. "Waiting for us." Reverend Edmund Hale was everywhere, leading prayer vigils, consoling families, joining every search, boots worn through from walking the same trails repeatedly. "We must have faith," he told cameras, tears streaming down his face. "God will bring them home." The community rallied around him. He became their moral center. Women brought casseroles. Men asked him to pray over their children. He was tireless, selfless, a beacon of light. 6 months passed, then a year. Search crews dwindled, news vans left. The forest kept its secrets. Case files gathered dust. Tom Pritchard died in 1998 from a heart attack, clutching Tyler's photo. His daughter Donna, 23, found him slumped over the case file. She inherited his badge, his guilt, keeping it on her desk for 24 years, never letting them be forgotten. 300 feet below the trails searchers had walked thousands of times, Tyler and Cassie learned screaming was pointless. The cave swallowed every sound. They learned hope was measured in heartbeats, that time could stop meaning anything. They learned monsters quoted scripture while sharpening needles, and they learned the world above had moved on, leaving them buried alive. Every Sunday at dawn, the Reverend descended into the cave with his leather medical bag. Tyler had stopped counting years. Time existed only in rhythms. Footsteps on stone stairs, the scrape of the metal door, sulfur smell from candles, the cold touch of steel. "The Lord requires purity," Hale whispered, preparing needles with practiced precision. His hands never trembled. 30 years of this, and they still moved with surgical certainty. Glass vials filled slowly, their blood, their life, dripping into containers labeled with dates and scripture references. Leviticus 17:11, Romans 12:1, Hebrews 9:22. Cassie's arms were roadmaps of scars, white lines crossing darker ones, a history written in damaged tissue. She'd learned to dissociate, to float above her body during the bleeding, to become someone else until it ended. Sometimes she stayed gone for days. Tyler stayed present, memorizing every detail of their captor's face, the mole beneath his left eye, the way his lips moved in silent prayer, the gold wedding band he never removed. He fed his hatred like kindling to stay sane, counting each vial, each wound, building a testimony in his mind for a rescue that never came. The cave walls were covered with symbols, crosses twisted into unrecognizable shapes, verses written in languages predating English, occult geometry carved with obsessive precision. Hale had transformed the natural cavern into a cathedral of madness, complete with a stone altar stained dark from decades of ritual. "You are my lambs," Hale said, voice trembling with religious fervor, eyes wet with tears of ecstasy. "Through your sacrifice I am cleansed, through your suffering I commune with the divine. You should feel blessed." He actually believed it. That was the most terrifying part. His absolute conviction that this was holy work. Upstairs, 300 feet above, his congregation praised his devotion, his tireless community service, his spiritual wisdom. Women asked him to baptize their babies. Men sought his counsel on marriage, career, faith. He was Pushmataha County's moral compass. Below, his true church operated in absolute darkness. 2 prisoners who'd aged from youth to middle age in captivity. 2 people the world had forgotten. 2 sacrifices bleeding slowly for a God that didn't exist. The door closed with its familiar clang. Another week survived. Cassie curled into Tyler's arms, both of them shaking. "Tell me about the son," she whispered, her voice barely human after years of screaming. Tyler described light he could barely remember. Marcus Torres heard it first, a sound that didn't belong to wind or wildlife. "Elena, wait." His wife stopped on the hiking trail, annoyed. They'd driven their RV from Arizona to Oklahoma for a quiet weekend, following a trail recommended by locals at the diner. This was supposed to be romantic. The moan came again, barely human, rising from the rocks like something clawing its way from hell. Elena's face went pale. "Marcus, that's not an animal." He was already moving toward the sound, pushing aside brush with his hiking stick, following his ears more than his eyes. There, a gap between boulders, barely visible beneath decades of overgrowth, exhaling stale air that smelled of copper and decay. He aimed his flashlight into the darkness, expecting maybe an injured deer, a trapped raccoon. 2 faces stared back, pale as death, eyes wide and unblinking, reflecting his light like cave-dwelling creatures adapted to darkness. Human faces, but wrong, aged and young simultaneously, marked with scars, expressions of such profound terror that Marcus stumbled backward. Elena's scream echoed through Pushmataha County forest, a sound that would replay in her nightmares for years. She was already on her phone, hands shaking so badly she could barely dial 911. "There are people in the rocks," she sobbed to the dispatcher. "Oh God, there are people buried in the rocks." Within an hour, The area swarmed with police, paramedics, news crews materializing like vultures. Sheriff Donna Pritchard arrived in 12 minutes, lights blazing, her father's cold case file suddenly burning hot in her hands after 24 years of ice. She stood at the cave entrance, staring into darkness her father had walked past 1,000 times during searches. The irony was crushing. Tom Pritchard had died without knowing his son's case was solvable, that the answer was 300 feet beneath his boots. Inside, they found a prison. Beds bolted to stone, chains anchored to walls, medical equipment, candles, symbols, vials of blood organized by date going back to 1992. And 2 people who'd been declared dead years ago, their memorial service held in 2000, somehow still breathing. Donna radioed for more units, her voice steady despite tears streaming down her face. "We found them. Dear God, we found Tyler and Cassie." Cassie Morrison stepped into sunlight and collapsed. Her skin, ghostly pale from 3 decades without sun, burned instantly despite the paramedics' attempts to shield her. She pushed them away with surprising strength, fingers digging into earth, sobbing words that made no sense. Fragments of prayers, apologies to people long dead, names no one recognized. Tyler stood motionless at the cave entrance, his body rigid as stone, eyes scanning the crowd of strangers with cameras and microphones thrust toward his face. 52 years old, but his mind was still 22. Trapped in 1992. "Can you tell us what happened?" a reporter shouted, camera light blinding. "How did you survive?" He didn't respond. He hadn't spoken in 15 years, his voice box atrophied from disuse and trauma. The ambulance ride to McAllister Regional Hospital became a nightmare. Cassie screamed when they closed the doors, clawing at the windows. "Not again, please not again. No more darkness." It took 3 paramedics to restrain her gently while administering sedatives. Tyler watched without expression, his eyes empty as abandoned houses. The hospital became a circus within hours. Specialists flew in from Johns Hopkins Mayo Clinic, psychiatric researchers who'd never seen trauma this profound. "It's unprecedented," Dr. Sarah Chen told the assembled team. 30 years of continuous captivity. Their psyches have adapted to survive conditions incompatible with normal human psychology. Cassie covered every wall of her hospital room with drawings using charcoal she'd begged from an art therapy session. She recreated the cave from memory obsessively, every crack, every symbol, every chain. She drew 10 950 tally marks, 1 for each day of captivity. Nurses found her at 3 a.m. still drawing, eyes glazed, hands moving mechanically. Tyler sat by the window in his room, watching the door with predatory focus, waiting for footsteps that followed the pattern he'd memorized in darkness. Sunday mornings his body tensed involuntarily, preparing for the ritual. He refused food unless it was placed in the exact position. Left side of the tray, specific distance from the edge. Control over small things kept him from complete dissolution. "Where is he?" Donna Pritchard asked gently during her 3rd attempt at interviewing Tyler. She'd waited, given him space, but time was critical. He remained silent, eyes distant. She tried a different approach, placing old photographs on the table, camp counselors, search parties, community vigils. Tyler's finger stopped on one image. A church newsletter from 1992. Reverend Edmund Hale surrounded by smiling youth, his arm around a young boy, his smile beatific. Tyler's hand trembled violently. He pointed, then covered his face. Donna's blood turned to ice. Her father had interviewed Hale dozens of times, trusted him, prayed with him. Reverend Edmund Hale stood at his pulpit that Sunday, his voice steady and warm, filling the Baptist church with practiced resonance. "Let us pray for the miracle of those found, and for healing in our community torn by such darkness." The congregation wept with joy and relief. He'd aged gracefully, silver hair, kind eyes crinkled with compassion, a grandfather everyone trusted with their deepest secrets. After service, he visited McAllister Regional Hospital with flowers, white lilies, symbol of purity. "I've prayed for them every single day," he told the nurses, his voice breaking with emotion. 30 years of prayers finally answered. It's a miracle. He dabbed his eyes with a handkerchief. May I see them? Just to let them know they're in our hearts. Security denied entry on Dr. Chen's orders. Hale smiled, understanding. Of course, they need time. I'll continue praying. He left the flowers, signed the visitor log with his characteristic elegant script, and drove home humming Amazing Grace. That night, 50 police officers surrounded his modest home 3 blocks from the church. Donna led the entry team, her father's unfulfilled oath driving every step, weapons drawn, expecting resistance. They found Reverend Hale watering his garden in the twilight, humming hymns, completely at peace. Reverend Hale, you're under arrest, Donna said, voice shaking despite her training. He set down the watering can carefully, brushed dirt from his hands, and smiled that same warm smile he'd given her at her father's funeral. I understand, Sheriff. May I finish watering the roses? They're quite thirsty. The search of his home revealed hell disguised as heaven. In his basement, hidden behind a false wall covered with family photos, an entrance to a tunnel, carefully constructed over decades, leading back to the cave system. Engineering diagrams, ventilation plans, supply schedules spanning 30 years. In his study, arranged on shelves like treasured first editions, journals, hundreds of them. Leather-bound, meticulously organized by year. Detailed accounts of every ritual, every drop of blood measured and catalogued, every prayer offered to his twisted god. Photographs of Tyler and Cassie at different ages, documenting their deterioration with scientific precision. One journal lay open on his desk, entry dated that morning. Year 30, day 10, 9:50. The lambs have been found. The cycle is complete. My work will be studied for generations. I have achieved immortality through their sacrifice. Edmund Hale was led away in handcuffs while neighbors watched in horror, still wearing his gardening gloves, still humming hymns. The courtroom fell silent as footage from the cave played on monitors. Every juror looked away at some point. Some covered their mouths, others wiped tears. Symbols covered every surface of the underground prison. Vials numbered in the thousands, organized chronologically. Cassie's charcoal drawings on stone walls, 10, 9, and 50 marks, one for each day of captivity. The defense attorney, Marcus Webb, a Dallas lawyer who'd taken the case for publicity, argued diminished capacity. My client suffers from religious delusion, a documented mental illness. He believed he was performing sacred rituals, not committing crimes. The gallery erupted in fury. Judge Patricia Morrow slammed her gavel repeatedly. The prosecutor, Amanda Cross, presented the journals. She read excerpts that made jurors physically ill. July 15, 1992. They are vessels of divine purification. Through their innocent blood, I commune with higher powers. The girl cried today. Good. Tears contain the purest essence of suffering. Amanda's voice remained steady, clinical. December 3, 2010. 18 years of rituals. The male has stopped speaking. Perfect silence. His submission is complete. Tyler was called to testify. The courtroom held its breath as he approached the witness box, moving like a man walking through water. He sat, staring at his hands. Judge Morrow leaned forward. Mr. Brennan, take your time. 5 minutes passed. 10. The only sound was the court reporter's breathing. Finally, Tyler looked up. His eyes found Hale sitting calmly at the defense table, hands folded, expression serene. Tyler's mouth opened. His voice emerged, rusted, broken, barely above a whisper, but carrying the weight of 3 decades. He stole our lives. 4 words. The jury wept. Several spectators sobbed openly. One juror, a mother of 3, covered her face with both hands. Tyler continued, words coming faster now, 30 years of silence breaking like a dam. Every Sunday for 30 years, the needles, the prayers. He told us we were blessed, that suffering brought us closer to God, that our pain purified him. Cassie's testimony lasted 6 hours. She described the rituals in excruciating detail, how Hale would descend the stairs singing hymns, how he'd cry afterward, convinced he was saving their souls, how he'd bring them food and medicine to keep them alive for the next bleeding. He called it the sacrament of eternal purification, she said, voice mechanical, dissociated. He told us we were chosen, special, that one day the world would understand his divine mission. She described anniversaries Hale celebrated, 10 years, 20 years, marking each decade with longer rituals, more elaborate prayers. She described how he'd shown them newspaper clippings about their disappearance, their memorial service, enjoying their grief. He said our families had moved on, that we belonged to God now, that we belonged to him. The gallery erupted again. Judge Morrow called a recess. Hale showed no emotion throughout, hands folded, lips moving in silent prayer, occasionally nodding as if agreeing with testimony about his own atrocities. The jury deliberated 47 minutes. When they filed back into the courtroom, none looked at the defense table. The forewoman, a 60-year-old librarian named Dorothy Hughes, stood with the verdict sheet trembling in her hands. On the charge of kidnapping in the first degree, count 1, guilty. Count 2, guilty. On the charge of aggravated assault with intent to cause serious bodily harm, counts 3 through 60, guilty. On the charge of unlawful imprisonment, guilty. On charges of torture under federal statute, guilty on all counts. The courtroom exploded. Cassie's mother collapsed in her seat. Tyler remained motionless, his expression unchanged, as if the verdict couldn't reach him through the protective numbness he'd built. Judge Morrow removed her glasses, and for the first time in 30 years on the bench, her voice shook with barely restrained fury. Mr. Hale, in my entire career, I have never encountered evil as calculated and sustained as yours. You wore the cloth while conducting rituals of unspeakable cruelty. You offered comfort to the families whose children you had imprisoned beneath their feet. You led search parties looking for victims you had already claimed. She paused, composing herself. You are a predator who weaponized faith, who transformed the sanctuary of religion into a hunting ground. You maintained a double life with such skill that an entire community trusted you with their spiritual welfare, while you drained the literal lifeblood from 2 innocent people for 3 decades. The sentence came swift and absolute. Life imprisonment without possibility of parole on each count, to be served consecutively. You will die in prison, Mr. Hale, and unlike your victims, you will die alone, unmourned, and forgotten. As guards approached, Hale stood calmly adjusting his tie. He turned to face Tyler and Cassie in the gallery. His smile was gentle, grandfatherly, completely sincere. I saved you, he said, voice carrying clearly through the silent courtroom. You'll understand one day. I made you eternal. Your suffering has meaning. You should thank me. Tyler lunged across the barrier with a roar that seemed torn from the earth itself. Deputies caught him, 4 men struggling to restrain his rage. Cassie remained frozen, her hand unconsciously covering the scars on her arm, eyes wide and distant. Outside the courthouse, Pushmataha County erupted in conflicted emotion. How had their spiritual leader hidden such darkness for 30 years? Who else had known? The Baptist church closed its doors permanently that evening, congregation scattered by shame and complicity. Donna visited Tom Pritchard's grave, placing a hand on the weathered headstone. We found them, Dad. We got him. But the victory felt hollow. Finding them hadn't saved them. Justice hadn't healed them. Tyler Brennan lived in a supervised facility outside Tulsa, unable to function in open spaces. Agoraphobia, complex PTSD, dissociative episodes that lasted days. He was 52 but felt ancient, his body aged by deprivation, his mind fractured beyond repair. Therapy sessions revealed the depth of his psychological dependence. Every Sunday morning he'd wake in panic, his body preparing for the ritual despite knowing rationally that Hale was imprisoned 300 miles away. Dr. Michael Torres, his psychiatrist, documented symptoms unprecedented in trauma literature. "He's Pavlovian," Torres explained to the medical team. 30 years of conditioning can't be undone. His nervous system expects the pattern. Tyler couldn't tolerate being alone. Staff rotated 24-hour observation. He couldn't eat unless someone watched him, mimicking the cave where Hale had observed every meal. He couldn't sleep without a light on, yet couldn't tolerate bright light. He existed in perpetual twilight, chemically managed, monitored like an artifact, too fragile for the world. Cassie moved to a small cabin in Montana, surrounded by mountains that blocked the horizon. She needed barriers, edges, limits to visibility. Open sky terrified her. Too much space, too many possibilities. She painted now on massive canvases, dark backgrounds with small points of light struggling through. Galleries called her work profound testimony of survival. Critics wrote dissertations. She sold paintings for 6 figures. She called it making sense of nothing. The art world celebrated her trauma, turned her suffering into commodity. Every exhibition opening felt like being displayed in the cave again, people staring, consuming her pain. She stopped attending her own shows. They never spoke to each other again. Dr. Chen arranged one meeting in 2023, thinking it might provide closure. They sat across a table in a neutral facility, 2 people who'd survived the unsurvivable together. Tyler couldn't look at her. Cassie couldn't stop crying. After 17 minutes of silence, they asked to leave. Too much shared trauma. Looking at each other meant looking at the cave. Marcus and Elena Torres divorced 2 years after the discovery. Elena developed severe PTSD from those faces in the darkness. She couldn't hike, couldn't camp, couldn't even look at photographs of their RV trip. Marcus tried to be supportive, but her nightmares consumed their marriage. They sold the RV for a quarter of its value. Neither could stand to see it. The cave was sealed with industrial concrete, marked with a memorial plaque. "In memory of time stolen and lives interrupted, may those who suffered here find peace." Pushmataha County became a dark tourism destination. People drove hours to take selfies at the memorial, to feel close to horror from safe distance. Donna Pritchard retired in 2024. Her father's case finally closed, but never resolved. She attended both Tyler and Cassie's therapy sessions when invited, apologizing for failures that weren't hers. Justice had been served, healing never came. In a maximum security prison in McAllister, Reverend Edmund Hale knelt in his cell every Sunday at dawn, praying. Guards reported he showed no remorse, no recognition of evil. In his mind, he remained righteous, chosen, blessed by suffering he'd inflicted. He requested his journals be donated to theological libraries. The request was denied. He smiled, patient, convinced future generations would vindicate him. Cassie Morrison stood before a college auditorium at NYU in February 2025, her first public speech. 300 students filled the lecture hall, silent as she approached the podium. Her hands trembled, holding her notes, but her voice emerged steady. "People ask if I've forgiven him." She paused, scanning faces too young to remember 1992. "Forgiveness requires acknowledgement of harm. He believes he blessed us. He believes we should be grateful. So forgiveness isn't possible. What I choose instead is to exist anyway." She gripped the podium. 30 years of my life are gone. I was 20. I'm 53 now. I never had children. Never built the art career I dreamed of in college. Never became who I was supposed to be. That version of Cassie Morrison died in 1992, but I'm still here. This version, broken and reconstructed, that's my victory. Not forgiveness, not healing, just continued existence despite everything designed to erase me. The audience rose in standing ovation. Cassie didn't smile. She'd learned applause felt like consumption. Tyler watched from his facility's common room via live stream, the only event he'd requested to see. Tears rolled down his weathered face. He whispered something only his attending nurse heard.
Take a breath.
"She's braver than me." It was the most he'd spoken in months. In Oklahoma, new students attended summer camps every year. Parents hugged their children tighter at drop-off. Background checks became federal requirements. Trust became a commodity earned slowly, lost instantly. Volunteers were screened through multiple databases. Churches implemented transparency policies. The Baptist church building sold to a tech company, renovated into offices. No historical marker mentioned what it had been. The community wanted to forget. Some scars don't heal, they just get painted over. The forest kept growing over the sealed cave. Pine trees dropped needles year after year, covering concrete with nature's amnesia. Leaves fell. Snow came. Spring returned. The earth continued its indifferent rotation, but some echoes never fade, some silences never end. Some prayers are answered too late to matter, and some people stolen from their lives can never fully return, no matter how many years pass or how much justice is served. Tyler and Cassie survived, but survival isn't the same as living, and being found isn't the same as being saved.